The courtroom in San Jose, California was packed. Journalists, legal analysts, and curious onlookers filled the wooden benches, anticipating what they believed would be just another corporate lawsuit. But this wasn't just any case. This was Elon Musk versus the Federal Regulatory Commission. The stakes? Billions of dollars. A legal battle over business autonomy versus government regulation had morphed into something far bigger. Some speculated this case could reshape corporate law in the U.S., while others simply wanted to see Musk humbled, his empire brought under tighter government control. At the judge's bench, Judge Ronald Beckett leaned back, an amused expression on his face. A veteran of the legal system, Beckett was known for his no-nonsense attitude, having presided over countless cases involving corporate giants. But this was Elon Musk. Musk sat at the defendant's table, his posture relaxed yet alert. No high-powered legal team whispering in his ear, no fleet of elite attorneys flanking him. Instead, Musk had made an unconventional and some would say reckless move. He was representing himself. Beckett exhaled, suppressing a smirk. "Mr. Musk, are you sure you don't want legal counsel? This is a highly technical case." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The media had already framed this as Musk's arrogance versus the U.S. government. The idea that he could take on a team of elite federal attorneys alone was practically laughable. But Musk simply tilted his head. "I think I'll manage." A chuckle came from the prosecution table. Thomas Langford, the lead attorney for the Federal Regulatory Commission, exchanged a knowing glance with his colleagues. Musk's confidence was amusing, but they all knew how this would end. Langford buttoned his suit jacket and strode toward the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are here today because Mr. Musk believes he is above regulation. He thinks his companies can operate without oversight, without accountability, that the laws that govern every other business in America don't apply to him." He turned to Musk with a smug half-smile. "Now, we all respect Mr. Musk's contributions to technology and innovation, but the law is the law. No one is exempt. Today, we will prove that Tesla, SpaceX, and his other ventures have repeatedly violated federal guidelines, choosing profits over people." The judge nodded. "Mr. Musk, your response?" Musk didn't immediately stand. Instead, he ran a hand along his chin, as if debating whether the effort was even worth it. Then, slowly, he rose. He adjusted his blazer and spoke, calm, deliberate. "Your Honor, I'm not here because I think I'm above the law. I'm here because I believe the law should serve the people, not the other way around." A few whispers broke out in the audience. Musk continued, his tone measured. "Regulation is important. I understand that. But when regulations are used to stifle innovation rather than protect consumers, we have a problem. The laws my companies are accused of violating? They were written for industries that have barely evolved in half a century. I'm not ignoring the law. I'm challenging whether the law still serves its purpose." Judge Beckett raised an eyebrow. "That sounds like a legislative argument, Mr. Musk. This is a courtroom." A hint of a smirk crossed Musk's face. "Then let's talk facts." Langford stepped forward, unimpressed. "With all due respect, Mr. Musk, the facts are not on your side." But Musk wasn't looking at him. Instead, he made direct eye contact with the judge. "The facts," Musk said, "are about to change." The air in the courtroom shifted. The smirk on Judge Beckett's face faded, just slightly. Even Langford's confidence seemed to waver. A heavy silence settled over the room. Musk remained standing, his gaze unwavering. Across the room, Langford gave a small dismissive shake of his head, as if Musk's confidence was nothing more than theater. Then he turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, let's cut through the dramatics and get to the real issue." He gestured to a stack of documents on his table. "The evidence we've gathered is extensive. Mr. Musk's companies have repeatedly violated federal safety regulations, financial disclosure requirements, and environmental policies. The facts speak for themselves." Langford turned to the jury, pacing slightly, letting the weight of his words settle. "And we're not just talking about minor infractions. What happened next would leave the entire courtroom in shock. We're talking about a blatant disregard for federal law. The question before this court is simple. Do we allow billionaires to rewrite the rules for themselves, or do we hold them accountable like every other business in America? Langford paused, turning toward Musk as if daring him to challenge the premise. Musk didn't blink. Judge Beckett leaned forward slightly. Mr. Musk, the prosecution has laid out their opening argument. You may respond. Musk adjusted his jacket and stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. Thank you, Your Honor. He turned toward the jury, hands clasped in front of him. Mr. Langford presents a compelling case, he said, his voice smooth and deliberate. There's just one problem. It's completely wrong. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Langford's jaw tightened. Musk gestured toward the stack of documents on the prosecution's table. What you see here is a collection of outdated policies being used as a weapon against progress. The claim? That my companies violated safety regulations. What they won't tell you is that those regulations were written for vehicles designed decades ago. He paused, letting that fact settle. They say we didn't comply. I say the rules never accounted for self-driving technology, reusable rockets, or batteries capable of powering entire city blocks. We're not violating laws. We're operating beyond them. Judge Beckett narrowed his eyes. Beyond them? Musk nodded. Yes, and that's the real issue here. The law is meant to protect the public. But what happens when outdated laws prevent progress instead? Langford scoffed and stepped forward. That's a convenient argument, Mr. Musk. The truth is you ignored federal oversight because it was inconvenient. He turned to the judge. Your Honor, may I present Exhibit A? Beckett nodded. Proceed. A large screen flickered to life, displaying a document filled with dense text. Langford pressed a button on his remote, zooming in on a highlighted passage. This is an internal email from one of Tesla's senior engineers, Langford said. It clearly states that production on a specific model continued despite known software failures in the vehicle's autopilot system. He turned back to Musk. Your own team knew the risks, yet you pushed forward. Musk studied the screen for a moment before shaking his head. Context is everything, Mr. Langford. Langford folded his arms. Then by all means, provide context. Musk turned back to the jury. Let's talk about that email. The so-called software failures mentioned were minor calibration issues in a beta program, issues that were identified, corrected, and improved. That's how innovation works. You test, you refine, and you move forward. Langford smirked. So you admit the failures existed? Musk's expression remained unchanged. Failures exist in every industry, but here's the difference. When a government agency makes a mistake, it gets buried in paperwork. When a company like mine makes a mistake, we fix it, fast, because that's the only way to survive in an industry where every second counts. A low murmur ran through the courtroom. Some jurors exchanged glances. Judge Beckett tapped his pen against the bench. Gentlemen, let's stay on track. Mr. Musk, are you denying that your company proceeded with production despite concerns raised by your own engineers? Musk met the judge's gaze. I'm saying those concerns were addressed, but I'll take it a step further. He turned to Langford. If you're going to use internal emails, why not show the full thread? The part where the engineering team confirms the issue was resolved before any vehicle was released? Langford hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. Musk tilted his head. Oh, you didn't bring that part, did you? Langford exhaled, sharply through his nose. That's irrelevant. Musk raised an eyebrow. Is it? Silence settled over the courtroom. Even Judge Beckett seemed to reassess the dynamic unfolding before him. But Musk wasn't done yet. Musk turned to his team. Bring up Exhibit B. The screen lit up again, this time displaying a government audit report on Tesla's energy sector. Red underlines streaked across the document, highlighting multiple instances where Tesla allegedly failed to disclose critical data to regulators. Langford faced the jury, his tone sharp and unwavering. According to this federal investigation, Tesla Energy withheld key performance data on solar panels, data that, if disclosed, could have prevented safety risks for thousands of consumers. He turned to Musk. Mr. Musk, would you like to explain why your company chose secrecy over transparency? Musk didn't flinch. Instead, he took a slow breath, nodding slightly, almost as if Langford had just set him up for the perfect response. Happy to explain, Musk said, stepping forward. His voice was steady, clear. That audit? It was conducted using a methodology that doesn't even apply to our technology. Langford scoffed. So the regulators were wrong? Musk turned to the jury. Let me put it this way, imagine someone trying to measure your smartphone's battery life using a system designed for gasoline engines. Would that make sense? A flicker of recognition crossed a few jurors' faces. Musk pressed on. The so-called missing data, the government claims we withheld? It wasn't hidden, it was measured differently. Our solar panels function in ways that traditional energy audits aren't designed to evaluate. Instead of working with us to improve their methods, regulators defaulted to accusations of misconduct. Langford clenched his jaw. That's a convenient excuse. Musk shrugged. It's not an excuse, it's a fact, and I can prove it. Langford didn't respond, but Musk wasn't waiting for permission. He turned to his laptop, tapped a few keys, and brought up his own exhibit. A new document flashed onto the screen, an internal email from the very agency Langford was citing. Musk pointed at the text. This is an internal memo from the regulatory team that conducted the audit. Read that line. Judge Beckett adjusted his glasses and glanced at the screen. His lips parted slightly as he read aloud. Due to the unique nature of Tesla's energy output system, our current evaluation model may not provide an accurate measurement of compliance. The courtroom fell silent. Musk turned back to Langford. That's your own evidence. Your own agency admitting that their evaluation didn't work for our systems. But instead of adapting, they pushed forward with claims of non-compliance. Langford's fingers curled into fists, but he forced a smile. Mr. Musk, even if what you're saying is true, it is. Langford ignored the interruption. You still failed to provide regulators with the data they requested. Regardless of measurement methods, there was a legal obligation to comply. Musk crossed his arms. And we did. The issue isn't that we refused to cooperate. The issue is that you wanted us to comply with standards that don't even make sense for our technology. A soft cough broke the tension. Judge Beckett leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin. Mr. Langford, do you have a response to that? Langford's mouth opened slightly, but for the first time that day, he had nothing to say. Musk exhaled, through his nose, tilting his head. I'll take that as a no. A chuckle rippled through the gallery, but Musk wasn't smiling. He wasn't here to entertain. He was here to win. But the fight was far from over. Langford wasn't going down, without throwing his biggest punch yet. The silence in the courtroom was heavy. Thomas Langford had been cornered. And he knew it. The prosecution had entered this trial expecting a swift, decisive victory. Now, for the first time, doubt hung in the air. Langford cleared his throat, adjusting his tie as he stepped back toward the prosecution table. His team avoided eye contact. He needed to regain control. All right, Mr. Musk, Langford said, his voice regaining its edge. You've had your fun. You've danced around regulations, twisted words, and cherry-picked evidence. His eyes locked onto Musk. But let's stop playing games. This case isn't about technological misunderstandings. It's about your pattern of defiance. Langford turned sharply, grabbing another document from his table and holding it up. Your Honor, I'd like to introduce Exhibit C. Judge Beckett nodded. Proceed. The screen behind Langford flickered again. This time, it displayed a timeline of Musk's past legal battles with the government. Each entry was accompanied by a headline, SEC lawsuit over Tesla tweets, NHTSA. Investigation into autopilot crashes, labor violation allegations at Tesla factory, SpaceX versus FAA. Regulatory disputes over launch. Approvals. Langford turned back to the jury, his voice cutting through the charged atmosphere. This isn't about one misunderstanding. It's about a history of disregarding the rules. Langford paced slowly toward the jury, his movements deliberate, letting the sheer number of cases on the screen speak for itself. "This," he said, gesturing at the display, "is not the record of a man being unfairly targeted. This is the record of a man who refuses to follow the rules." His voice grew firmer. "Every time regulators try to hold you accountable, you push back. You delay. You manipulate public opinion. And now, you expect this court to believe you're just a misunderstood genius, a victim of outdated policies?" He let the words settle, then turned sharply to Musk. "Tell me, Mr. Musk, if the system is so flawed, why is it that you're the only one constantly at war with it?" A murmur rippled through the gallery. Even Judge Beckett sat up a little straighter, his eyes locked on Musk. Musk inhaled, his face unreadable. He didn't glance at the screen or at Langford. Instead, he turned directly to the jury. "I get it," he said, his voice softer now, almost conversational. "That list looks bad. Makes me seem like a troublemaker, someone who fights just to fight." He took a step toward the screen, pointing at the first headline. "The SEC case." That wasn't about fraud. It was about a single tweet. A tweet they claimed misled investors, except the stock price went up after I posted it. So who exactly was harmed? He moved down the list. The NHTSA investigation into Tesla's autopilot. Every major car manufacturer has recalls, software issues, safety probes. But when it's Tesla, it becomes a national scandal. His tone didn't rise, but his intensity did. The labor complaints. Do you know how many false claims are filed against major corporations every year? How many unions use lawsuits as leverage? Yet when it's Tesla, it's painted as proof of some deep moral failing. Finally, Musk stopped at the last entry. He exhaled sharply and shook his head. "And this one, my personal favorite, the SpaceX FAA battle. We were denied a launch license over paperwork. Meanwhile, NASA, the very agency responsible for human spaceflight, cleared us." "So tell me, was that about safety or control?" Langford's jaw tightened. "You're avoiding the point," he shot back. "You have a pattern of resisting authority." Musk let out a dry chuckle. "Yeah, because authority has a pattern of slowing things down." The tension thickened. Judge Beckett leaned forward. "Mr. Musk," he said, his voice firm, "are you suggesting that certain regulations should be ignored?" Musk met his gaze. "No, Your Honor," he said, shaking his head. "I'm saying laws are meant to serve the public, not the other way around." The courtroom fell silent. Langford opened his mouth, then closed it. He had thrown everything he had at Musk, yet Musk was still standing, stronger, sharper, in control. But what happened next would catch even Musk off guard. The weight of his words hung in the air. Judge Beckett didn't speak. Langford didn't move. Even the jury seemed transfixed, shifting their gaze between the prosecution table and the man who had just reframed the entire argument, not as a question of legality, but of power. Then, for the first time since the trial began, Musk sat down, not in defeat, but in confidence. He had said what he needed to say. Now, he was waiting. Langford, still standing, exhaled slowly, gripping the sides of the podium, his knuckles turning. "Bill." He knew what had just happened. Musk had shifted the burden. Now, instead of proving that Musk had broken the law, Langford had to prove that the law even mattered in the face of innovation, and that was a much harder fight to win. Judge Beckett cleared his throat. "Mr. Langford," he said, measured. "Do you have anything further?" Langford squared his shoulders. "Yes, Your Honor." He turned back to Musk. "You've done a brilliant job making this trial about philosophy instead of accountability. But I'm not here to debate government oversight. I'm here to argue the facts." He grabbed another document from the prosecution table. "So let's talk about something that isn't outdated," he said. The screen behind him flickered again. A new document appeared, a classified Tesla engineering report, recently obtained through discovery. The report contained technical breakdowns of a major software update, one that affected Tesla's full self-driving mode. Langford stepped forward. "This, Mr. Musk," he said, "is a report written by your own engineers, and according to this report..." The courtroom braced for impact. Tesla released a software update that significantly changed how its self-driving AI processes data. But here's the problem. Langford clicked a button, zooming in on a single paragraph of the document. It clearly stated that there was a known risk, a 1 in 10,000 chance that the new system could misinterpret traffic signals in complex urban environments. That risk, however small, was deemed acceptable by Tesla, and yet the report was never submitted to the NHTSA. Langford turned to Musk, his voice cold. Would you like to explain why? The gallery tensed. The jury leaned in. Musk didn't blink. That's easy, he said. Because the risk was mathematically irrelevant. Langford raised an eyebrow. Irrelevant? Musk nodded. A 1 in 10,000 probability doesn't mean one failure every 10,000 miles. It means one potential anomaly per 10,000 simulations. Simulations, mind you, run under extreme stress conditions. If we applied that same standard to human drivers, no one would be allowed on the road. Langford's jaw twitched. The NHTSA has a legal right to that data. Musk tilted his head. Sure, and we would have provided it, if they had asked. Langford hesitated. Musk pressed forward. That report wasn't hidden. It was an internal engineering memo. We conduct thousands of these analyses every year. We release the findings relevant to consumer safety, not just the ones that make headlines. He glanced at the jury. That's how real progress works. You don't halt an entire system over a single anomaly in a controlled test. If we did that, planes wouldn't fly, buildings wouldn't be built, and new medicines would never reach the market. Judge Beckett exhaled sharply, rubbing his temple. Gentlemen, let's keep this focused. Musk leaned forward slightly. I am focused, Your Honor. Focused on what actually matters. Langford opened his mouth, but Beckett raised. A hand, that's enough, Mr. Langford. The words hit the room like a thunderclap. Langford stiffened. Musk didn't move. Beckett removed his glasses, setting them down. He massaged the bridge of his nose before looking up. Mr. Langford, I respect the work of regulatory agencies. I respect the law. But I also respect reality. And the reality is you haven't proven intent to mislead or avoid compliance. Langford's lips parted. His face paled. Beckett continued. This case was brought under the assumption that Mr. Musk and his companies deliberately evaded regulation. But what I've seen today suggests something else. This is a case of laws struggling to keep up with technology. The gallery erupted. Musk remained still. He knew what was coming next. So did Langford. The courtroom buzzed with shock, disbelief, and restless energy. Beckett's words had landed hard, sending waves through the gallery. Langford stood frozen, his grip tightening on the podium. Musk? He didn't react. He didn't need to. He had already won the moment the judge acknowledged the real issue. Beckett exhaled, adjusting his glasses. His gaze returned to the prosecution. Mr. Langford, let's be honest. You came in expecting a simple case of regulatory non-compliance. But what I've seen today suggests something much deeper, something beyond Tesla, beyond SpaceX, beyond this courtroom. Tesla's latest software update introduced a fundamental shift in how its self-driving AI processes data. But here's the problem. One click, one zoomed-in paragraph, and everything changed. The document clearly stated that Tesla was aware of a risk, a 1 in 10,000 chance that the new system could misinterpret traffic signals in complex urban environments. A small probability, yes, but significant. Tesla deemed the risk acceptable. Yet this report was never submitted to the NHTSA. Langford turned to Musk, his voice cold. Would you like to explain why? The gallery tensed. The jury leaned in. Musk didn't blink. That's easy, he said. Because the risk was mathematically irrelevant. Langford raised an eyebrow. Irrelevant? Musk nodded. A 1 in 10,000 probability doesn't mean one failure every 10,000 miles. It means one anomaly per 10,000 simulations. Simulations run under extreme stress conditions. If we held human drivers to the same standard, no one would be allowed on the road. Langford's jaw tightened. The NHTSA has a legal right to that data. Musk tilted his head. Sure, and we would have provided it, if they had asked. Langford hesitated. Musk pressed forward. That document you just showed? It wasn't hidden. It was an internal engineering memo. We conduct thousands of these analyses every year. We release what's relevant to consumer safety, not just what makes headlines. He glanced at the jury. That's how real progress works. You don't shut down an entire system over one controlled test anomaly. If we did, planes wouldn't fly. Buildings wouldn't be built. New medicines would never reach the market. Judge Beckett exhaled sharply, rubbing his temple. Gentlemen, let's keep this focused. Musk leaned forward slightly. I am focused, Your Honor. Focused on what actually matters. Langford opened his mouth, but Judge Beckett raised a hand. That's enough, Mr. Langford. Langford turned, caught off guard. Your Honor? Beckett sighed, shaking his head slightly. I've heard enough. The words hit the room like a thunderclap. Langford stiffened. Musk didn't move. Beckett removed his glasses, setting them down. He massaged the bridge of his nose before looking up. Mr. Langford, I respect the work of regulatory agencies. I respect the law. But I also respect reality. And the reality is, you haven't proven intent to mislead or evade compliance. Langford's lips parted, his face paled. Beckett continued, his voice steady. This case was built on the assumption that Mr. Musk and his companies deliberately avoided regulation. But what I see is something different. I see laws struggling to keep up with technology. The gallery erupted. The jury exchanged stunned glances. Musk remained still. He already knew what was coming next. Judge Beckett adjusted his glasses, shifting his attention back to the prosecution. Mr. Langford, let's be honest. You came in expecting this to be a simple case of regulatory non-compliance. But today we've seen something deeper. Something that goes beyond Tesla, beyond SpaceX, beyond this courtroom. Langford finally found his voice. Your Honor, I don't dispute that technology evolves quickly, but laws exist for a reason. The moment we start making exceptions, Beckett cut him off. This isn't about exceptions. It's about recognizing the limits of the current system. Mr. Musk's testimony presents a legitimate challenge to how we regulate industries that are constantly evolving. Langford started to respond, but the judge wasn't finished. We live in an era where self-driving cars, private space travel, and AI aren't science fiction anymore. And yet, we still use oversight frameworks designed for industries that were predictable, stable, and slow-moving. Silence. Beckett leaned forward, folding his hands. His voice was lower now, but firm. To be clear, I'm not saying oversight is unnecessary. I'm saying the way we apply it needs to change. Langford shifted uncomfortably. So what does that mean for this case, Your Honor? Beckett didn't hesitate. It means that given the evidence, I cannot in good faith rule against Mr. Musk. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Journalists scrambled to take notes. Langford went pale. The jury exchanged glances. Musk moved, just slightly tilting his head, as if this was the outcome he had expected all along. Beckett's tone was decisive. This court finds no clear evidence of deliberate regulatory evasion. While concerns remain valid. It's clear that many of these charges stem from outdated policies struggling to regulate modern technology. Langford clenched his fists. Your Honor, if we dismiss this case, we set a dangerous precedent. We're allowing corporations to dictate which laws they follow. Beckett slammed his gavel. The room jolted. That's enough, Mr. Langford. His eyes narrowed slightly. You're making the wrong argument. The courtroom held its breath. The precedent we set today isn't about corporations dodging regulation. It's about regulators acknowledging when they are ill-equipped to oversee an evolving landscape. Langford opened his mouth, then shut it. He had no more cards to play. Beckett turned to Musk. Mr. Musk, you are dismissed from this case with no findings of wrongdoing. However, I strongly advise you to work with regulators moving forward, rather than forcing battles like this one to play out in court. Musk gave a slow nod. Fair enough. The judge turned to the jury. Thank you for your service. This court is adjourned. The gavel struck. Just like that, it was over. The prosecution table sat in stunned silence. Langford remained frozen before slowly gathering his papers. His face was blank. He had lost. Meanwhile, Musk stood, buttoning his jacket. Cameras trained on him, waiting for a reaction, a victory speech, something. Instead, he turned to Langford. No hard feelings, Musk said casually. Langford inhaled sharply through his nose, barely masking his irritation. Then, without another word, Musk strode toward the courtroom doors, stepping into the blinding flash of cameras outside. But beyond the headlines, beyond the victory, one thing was clear. This wasn't just a win for Musk. It was a turning point. The system would never be the same again.